The first thing I heard after dying was not thunder, not a doctor shouting for a pulse, not even the final bell that had once ended my life at Westbridge Academy. It was a knock. 3 soft taps, then 2 impatient ones, the exact rhythm Mira Vale used whenever she wanted to pretend she was polite while forcing her way into my room. I opened my eyes to the pale gray ceiling above Dormitory C, room 417, with the same crack shaped like a crooked river running from the light fixture to the sprinkler head. My throat locked. My hands flew to my chest, searching for the wet warmth of blood that should have been there after the staircase fall, after the shove, after the blur of white railing and red panic and Myra's voice whispering, "Nobody will believe you now." But there was no blood. There was no shattered phone in my palm. There was only my old blue blanket, my old exam timetable taped beside my desk, and my phone buzzing with a notification dated 3 weeks before the national scholarship exam that had destroyed me. Then came the knock again, soft, 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 pause, sharp, sharp. My body knew that sound before my brain accepted the impossible. I had returned. I had been dragged backward into the exact morning when Mira first came to borrow my annotated syllabus, the morning I first smiled like an idiot and opened the door to the girl who would copy my handwriting, steal my study plan, wear my cardigan, use my student ID, fake my messages, frame my room, take my scholarship, and watch me die with the expression of someone checking whether her lipstick had smudged. I sat up so fast the room tilted, and for one breath I was back on the staircase again, gripping the cold railing while Mira stood above me in the same cream sweater she had bought after seeing mine, her eyes shiny with fake tears and real triumph. In my first life, everyone called her my shadow, as if it were cute. "You two are practically twins," teacher said, because she wore her hair in the same low braid 2 days after I did, ordered the same black coffee after hearing me ask for it, highlighted her books in the same color system after stealing mine, and even started tilting her head the way I did when answering questions in class. I laughed along because I thought imitation was admiration, and because girls like me were trained to be grateful for company. Mira had arrived mid-year with a tragic story about transferring schools after bullying, and I had believed every trembling word. I let her sit beside me. I gave her my spare charger. I shared my dorm snacks. I explained teachers' habits, exam patterns, scholarship deadlines, and which library table had the best lighting. She thanked me by slowly becoming me, then replacing me so completely that when the scandal broke, nobody could tell where my life ended and her costume began. She copied my notes, then accused me of stealing hers. She copied my schedule, then claimed I followed her. She copied my room decor, then planted exam material in my drawer, and cried that she had always felt unsafe around me. By the time I understood that a copycat is not trying to become your friend but your alibi, I was already standing in front of the disciplinary board while she sat behind me with my beige scarf around her neck, wiping dry eyes. The knocking continued. "Dawn? Are you awake? I know you are. I saw your light under the door." Myra's voice slipped through the gap, syrupy and small, polished with just enough helplessness to make anyone listening think she was harmless. In my first life, I had opened the door in 5 seconds. She had stepped in wearing the same loose navy cardigan I owned, except hers still had the tag tucked inside the sleeve. She had blinked at my wall calendar and said, "Wow, you're so organized. I wish I could think like you." Then she asked for my exam prep folder just for tonight, and I gave it to her because she looked close to tears. That folder contained every strategy one had built over 6 months. Teacher preferences, predicted essay angles, formulas, sample introductions, and a private revision map based on old papers I had legally collected from the library archive. 3 weeks later, an anonymous report claimed I had distributed leaked exam predictions for money. Screenshots appeared from an account using my photo. The printed packets found in my room looked like my formatting, because Mira had copied that too. She said she had tried to warn staff about me, but was scared. The board believed her because she looked like a softer version of me, a version that cried on cue and never contradicted authority. They called me calculating. They called her brave. This time, I did not open the door. I pressed my palm over my mouth and forced myself to breathe silently while my phone buzzed again. The notification banner read, "Housing Office. Room change applications closed today at 5 p.m. My heart stopped, restarted, and then steadied with a coldness that felt older than my body. In my first life, I ignored that email because room 417 had the best view of the courtyard, because I liked the afternoon light, because I thought moving before exams would be stressful. That decision gave Mira a stage. It gave her a door to knock on, a room to enter, a drawer to plant evidence in, a place to be seen visiting whenever she needed witnesses. She built her whole performance around my accessibility. I had thought privacy was something people respected unless invited in. Mira taught me privacy was something predators measured, mapped, and exploited. The only reason she could frame me was because I stayed exactly where she expected me to be. So while she whispered through the door, "Dawn, please, I'm panicking," I reached for my laptop, opened the housing portal with shaking fingers, and submitted the room change request I had never submitted before. Reason for transfer: lock malfunction, privacy concern, repeated uninvited visits, exam preparation disruption. Requested relocation: any available single room. I attached photos of the loose latch I had once complained about only to my mother. I attached a screenshot of Myra's messages from the night before asking, "What time do you usually sleep? Do you lock your drawer?" I did not embellish. I did not accuse her of future crimes. I simply told the truth early, which was something the old me had always done too late.
"Dawn."
Myra's voice sharpened behind the door. "Are you mad at me?" That was her favorite hook. If I opened the door, she would enter as a victim of my silence. If I refused, she would collect my refusal as evidence of cruelty. In my first life, she had trained me to answer quickly by making every delay feel like an injury. This time I muted my phone, lowered my feet to the cold floor, and looked around room 417 with the eyes of a woman visiting her own crime scene. My desk still held the glass pen holder my aunt gave me. My closet still contained the cream sweater Mira would copy next week. My drawer still held the blue exam admission envelope that she would later ask to compare with hers. The corkboard above my bed displayed my weekly schedule in neat black ink, including library hours, shower times, breakfast habits, and the Friday night review session that she would duplicate so perfectly everyone would later claim we were always together. I stood up, pulled the schedule down, folded it into 4 pieces, and slipped it inside my textbook. Then I walked to the door, not to open it, but to slide the chain lock into place. The tiny metallic click sounded louder than a scream. Mira heard it. Silence pressed against the door. Then a laugh, breathy and wounded. "You're locking me out?" I just wanted help. I imagined her standing there with her soft pink notebook hugged to her chest, head tilted, eyes scanning the corridor for witnesses. She never performed unless someone could see. A door across the hall creaked, and instantly her tone changed. "It's okay," she said louder, voice trembling beautifully. "I understand you're stressed. I'll come back later." Footsteps retreated, but not all the way. I knew because in my first life, after borrowing my folder, she had once joked that she could tell when I was lying from the rhythm of my footsteps. Back then, I thought it was funny. Now I stood barefoot in the middle of my room and counted. 8 steps down the corridor, pause, 2 steps back. She was waiting around the corner. She expected me to crack. She expected the old Dawn, the one who hated being misunderstood, to open the door and chase after her with apologies. But death does something useful to a people-pleaser. It burns the apology out of your throat. By noon, the housing officer approved my request because apparently room 512 in dormitory A had been vacated that morning by a student leaving for medical treatment. "It's a smaller room," Miss Harlow told me over the phone, her voice brisk and bored. "No courtyard view, but it's a single, electronic lock, and there's a camera at the end of the hallway. You'll need to collect the new key card before 4:30. Do you want it?" I almost laughed. Did I want it? In my first life, I had begged the disciplinary board for camera footage from dormitory C after exam materials were found in my drawer, only to learn the hallway camera outside room 417 had been under maintenance for 2 weeks. Mira knew that. Of course she knew. She had chosen my room as her stage because its blind spot was famous among students who snuck in kettles and late-night visitors. Dormitory A, however, housed scholarship finalists and international boarders. Its cameras worked, its entry logs were digital, and its supervisors treated missing spoons like national security matters. "Yes," I said. "I'll take it." Ms. Harlow paused, probably surprised by the speed of my answer. "You'll need to move quietly. We don't have staff available to help." Quietly. The word settled in my chest like a key turning. "That's perfect," I said. The first pattern interruption came at lunch. Mira slid into the chair opposite me carrying a tray arranged almost exactly like mine. Cucumber sandwich cut diagonally, green apple, black coffee, yogurt untouched. Yesterday, she hated black coffee. In my first life, I would have noticed and felt weirdly flattered. Today I watched her stir sugar into it when she thought I wasn't looking. "You didn't answer this morning," she said softly. I was worried. She had changed her hair. Not fully, not obviously, but enough. My low braid had become her low braid, tied with a navy ribbon she had never worn before. Her eyes flicked to my empty wrist. I had stopped wearing the silver bracelet she copied last life. She frowned for half a second, then smiled. "Are you okay?" Around us, cafeteria noise swelled. Trays clattering, boys laughing too loudly, the scholarship committee table whispering about mock interviews. I knew this scene. In my first life, she asked for my prep folder here after failing at my door, and I handed it over because she looked exhausted. This time, I took a slow bite of my sandwich and said, "I'm fine. I'm just keeping my materials private until after the exam." The spoon in her yogurt froze. Private. Such a simple word. Mira looked as if I had slapped her. "Of course," she said, blinking rapidly. "I wasn't asking for anything." I smiled. "I know." Another girl at our table, Priya, glanced between us. Priya had been the first to unfollow me after the scandal. In my first life, I hated her for it, but later, during the week between expulsion and death, I discovered Mira had shown her fake screenshots where I called Priya desperate and slow. Mira never destroyed relationships by attacking from outside. She borrowed your voice first. I looked at Priya now and asked, "Did you finish the chemistry review? I found a good public archive source if you need one. I can send the link in the group chat." Public. Group chat. No private files, no secret handovers, no one-on-one dependency. Priya brightened. Myra's smile thinned. "That's generous," Mira said. "You're always generous when people are watching." In my first life, I would have panicked and defended myself. This time, I laughed lightly, like she had made a joke, and said, "Then keep watching. Maybe you'll learn something." That afternoon, I moved without drama. I did not announce it. I did not tell my friends. I did not post a picture of cardboard boxes or complain about stairs. I borrowed 2 suitcases from storage, packed my most important documents first, and carried them to dormitory A in 3 trips under the excuse of laundry. The old me would have felt guilty for secrecy. The reborn me understood that secrecy is not always deception. Sometimes it is a boundary with its mouth closed. Room 512 was narrower than 417 and smelled faintly of disinfectant, but the lock beeped when I entered, the hallway camera blinked red, and the window faced the back garden where no one performed for an audience. I placed my exam envelope in the metal drawer under the bed, changed the drawer code, then changed it again because in my first life Mira had guessed my passwords for my favorite poem. I removed every visible schedule from my walls. I switched my phone lock screen from a photo of my parents to a blank gray background. I renamed my study files with boring labels like laundry receipts and old forms. Then I returned to room 417 one last time with a roll of tape, a cleaning cloth, and a cardboard box of things I did not mind losing. Here is where someone foolish would have set a trap. Someone angry would have planted fake evidence, hidden cameras, or dramatic notes saying, "Got you." But I had already died once because everyone believed the girl with the cleaner story, not the girl with the louder truth. I needed nothing illegal, nothing theatrical, nothing that could be twisted into malice. So I cleaned room 417 until it looked vacant. I took my bedding, my textbooks, my charger, my files, my calendar, my spare key, and even the lavender air freshener Mira once copied. I left only the university-issued mattress, desk, chair, and wardrobe. On the inside of the door, I placed the official housing notice Miss Harlow had printed, Room transfer completed. Student reassigned. Vacant room under inventory check. It was not addressed to Mira. It was not a threat. It was not a message. It was simply true. Then I photographed the empty room with timestamps, emailed the photos to housing, copied myself, and walked out. As the door clicked shut behind me, I realized my hands were no longer shaking. My old life had ended in a corridor where Mira controlled the witnesses. My new life had begun in one where the only witness I needed was a red camera light that never blinked away. Mira did not notice immediately. That was the beautiful part. Copycats do not watch the person. They watch the pattern. For 2 days, she copied the shape of a girl who was no longer there. She arrived at the cafeteria at my old time and sat facing the entrance, waiting for me to walk in with my coffee. I came 20 minutes earlier and left before she arrived. She went to the third-floor library table, where I used to study, beneath the broken lamp. I had moved to the law reading room, where silence was enforced by a librarian with the soul of a prison warden. Mira wore the cream sweater I had stopped wearing. I wore a plain black blouse. She submitted a literature reflection using the same opening phrase I had used in class last week, except I had changed mine before turning it in. She asked Priya if I was still upset, and Priya, who had received the public archive link from me and no fake screenshots yet, said, "She seems fine." That answer bothered Mira more than anger would have. Anger can be performed against. Calmness gives a manipulator no handle. On the third morning, she cornered me outside the science block. "Are you avoiding me?" she asked. Her voice had lost the trembling sugar. Up close, I could see the cracks in her costume. Foundation not blended at the jaw, nails bitten raw despite the pale polish, dark circles under eyes that had spent nights planning other people's downfall. I had once mistaken those cracks for vulnerability. "No," I said. "I'm preparing." "Without me." "Yes." Her nostrils flared. Then she softened so quickly, it was almost impressive. "Dawn, I know you think I take too much from you. Maybe I do. I just admire how you think. You make everything look easy, and I'm scared. My family keeps saying the scholarship is my only chance. Yours too, I know, but you're naturally brilliant. I'm always behind." There it was, the confession-shaped hook. In my first life, she had used that exact line before I gave her my marked essays. "You're naturally brilliant, so helping me costs you nothing." People like Mira never steal from those they consider equal. They steal from those they resent for having something they want but refuse to build. I looked at her and said, "Then build your own system. You still have time." For 1 second, hatred flashed across her face so nakedly that the old Dawn inside me flinched. Then a group of juniors passed, and Myra's eyes filled with tears as if someone had turned on a tap. "I'm trying," she whispered. "I just thought friends helped each other." The juniors slowed. I heard one whisper, "Is that Dawn?" The trap opened its little mouth. If I sounded cold, I became the villain. If I comforted her, I became accessible again. So I did something Mira did not expect. I stepped closer, took out my phone, opened the scholarship resources page, and said warmly, "They do. Here, the school uploaded all public study guides. I'll send them to the finalist group too so nobody misses out." Mira stared at the screen like I had offered her a glass of water when she had asked for my blood. "That's not what I meant." I smiled. "I know, but it's what I can give." The juniors lost interest and walked on. Her tears vanished before they reached her cheeks. The real exam scandal in my first life began 10 days before the test, with a fake leak. That was the part nobody understood, because everyone assumed leaked answers had actually existed. They hadn't. Not at first. Mira and her hidden ally, a senior named Caleb, who worked part-time in the administrative office, created a packet that looked like leaked exam material by combining old questions, my predictions, and fabricated answer keys. They sold it quietly to desperate students under an anonymous account, then arranged for the packet to be discovered in my room along with payment screenshots tied to an account using my photo. The trick was elegant in the ugliest way. The packet was fake enough that no real exam security breach occurred, but convincing enough to ruin whoever appeared responsible. Mira used my study folder to make the fake leak look smart. Caleb used office access to print documents on school paper. When accusations came, Mira cried that she had bought the packet from me because I pressured her, then claimed she was coming forward out of guilt. She received a reduced penalty for cooperation. I received expulsion. Caleb vanished into another school, and the scholarship I had earned became Myra's redemption story, the poor bullied transfer who resisted corruption and rose above a toxic friend. In this life, I could not accuse them of a crime that had not happened yet. I also could not wait for them to destroy me. So I changed the terrain. I stopped being alone with Mira. I moved every academic conversation into group channels. I saved screenshots without commentary. I logged my study sources in a shared document visible to my advisor, Professor Keene, whose reputation for fairness was matched only by his hatred of messy citations. I told him I wanted my scholarship prep to be auditable because competition made people nervous. He raised one eyebrow and said, "That is either mature or paranoid." I said, "Can it be both?" He almost smiled. Then he signed off on my source log. It listed every archive paper, every textbook chapter, every public lecture, every practice question, and every date I accessed them. I gave myself a paper trail so clean that anyone trying to drag mud across it would leave footprints. Mira adapted. Copycats always do. When she realized she could not get my folder through pity, she tried proximity. She joined the debate club because I had joined, then discovered I had withdrawn 2 days earlier to attend closed scholarship workshops. She bought the same black satchel I used in my first life, but I switched to an old canvas tote. She copied my handwriting slant after borrowing Priya's notes, but I began typing all submissions. She told people we had planned to study together, and I abandoned her. I replied in group chats, "I'm studying independently this cycle. Happy to share public resources here." She posted vague messages about people who change when exams get competitive. I liked the post. That confused her enough that she deleted it. Every time she reached for my pattern, I broke it, not loudly, not dramatically, just one step to the side. By the end of the week, she looked exhausted from chasing a reflection that kept turning into glass. The second pattern interruption arrived in the form of a red envelope slipped under my new door. For half a second, seeing paper slide across the floor of room 512 made my stomach clench. Then I remembered. Mira did not know this room. Nobody did except housing, my parents, and Professor Keene because my source log listed my official accommodation. I picked up the envelope using a tissue, because death had made me dramatic in practical ways, and opened it over my desk. Inside was a note from Ms. Harlow. "Please confirm whether belongings remain in C417. Inventory tomorrow. If unclaimed items are found, disposal fee applies." I almost laughed. Housing bureaucracy, my unexpected guardian angel. I emailed back immediately. No belongings remain. Room vacated and photographed on transfer date. Please proceed with inventory. Then I attached my time-stamped photos again. At the bottom, after a long pause, I added one sentence. Due to repeated uninvited visits before transfer, please ensure any access attempts to the vacated room are logged. I did not name Mira. I did not have to. That night, Mira messaged me at 11:47 p.m. "Dawn, can we talk?" I left it unread. At 11:49, "I feel like you're misunderstanding me." Unread. At 11:52, "People are saying you moved. Did you?" I stared at that one for a long time. Who told her? Housing would not. My parents would not. Professor Keene would rather eat chalk. Maybe she had finally checked room 417. Maybe she had seen the notice. Maybe her plan required my old room so urgently that she had gone there and found emptiness instead of access. My pulse quickened, but I did not answer. At midnight, another message appeared. "If you moved because of me, that's really hurtful." I set my phone face down. Hurtful. The word had once ruled me. Now it sounded like a costume dragging on the floor. The next day, Mira arrived in class wearing my old face. Not literally, of course, but close enough to make Priya stare. She had braided her hair low, used minimal makeup the way I used to, chosen a crisp white shirt under a navy sweater vest, and even carried a green highlighter clipped to her notebook. The old Dawn would have felt invaded. The reborn Dawn felt something colder. Confirmation. She had not been admiring me. She had been rehearsing me. During ethics seminar, Professor Keene assigned a discussion prompt. When does collaboration become academic dishonesty? The timing was so perfect, I almost believed the universe had a sense of humor. Mira raised her hand before I did. I think intent matters, she said, voice clear and humble. Sometimes students share materials because they trust each other, and one person might misuse that trust. The victim can look guilty if the other person is manipulative. Her eyes flicked to me on the word manipulative. Around the room, heads turned slightly. She was laying groundwork. In my first life, I had not noticed until the foundation was already under my feet. Professor Keene looked interested. So, how do we protect both collaboration and integrity? Mira opened her mouth, but I raised my hand. The room shifted. I rarely interrupted. Transparency, I said. Public channels for shared resources. Source logs. Avoiding private exchange of high-stakes materials close to exams. And not using friendship as pressure to access someone's work. Myra's pen stopped moving. Professor Keene nodded slowly. Good. Specific. Anyone disagree? Nobody did. That was the moment I saw Mira understand that I was not merely avoiding her. I was removing the shadows where her story needed to grow. She smiled at me after class, but it was the kind of smile a person gives a locked door. Then Caleb appeared. In my first life, Caleb had been background noise until it was too late. Tall, sleepy-eyed, always carrying office keys, always joking with teachers, always helping set up exam rooms. He was the sort of boy adults trusted because he looked too bored to scheme. I had spoken to him maybe 3 times before he helped ruin me. In this life, he found me outside the administration building with a cardboard box of old debate trophies in his arms. Don Ellis, right? He said, as if we had not been classmates for 2 years. Myra's friend. There it was, the label he wanted me under. I adjusted my tote strap and said, we're in the same year. His smile barely moved. Cold. She said you were close. People say lots of things. He laughed. Careful. That's how rumors start. I held his gaze. No. Rumors start when people benefit from them. His laugh stopped. It was only a second, but it was enough. Caleb was not bored. He was measuring. He shifted the box against his hip. Anyway, admin asked finalists to confirm dorm addresses for exam morning pickup. You still in C417? The question was casual, almost lazy. My skin went cold beneath my blouse. Exam morning pickup did not require dorm addresses. Finalists reported to the auditorium. In my first life, Mira had knocked on room 417 at dawn on exam day, claiming she was nervous and wanted to walk together. 10 minutes later, supervisors found the fake leak packet in my drawer after an anonymous tip. Now Caleb was fishing for my location under an administrative lie. I let my face remain blank. Check the official system, I said. Housing updated it. His eyes narrowed almost imperceptibly. System's been slow. Then ask Ms. Harlow. I stepped around him. Behind me, he said, you're making this complicated. I did not turn back. No. I'm making it documented. That evening, I wrote another email. Dear Ms. Harlow, a student assistant asked me verbally to confirm my dorm address for exam morning pickup. Could you please confirm whether such a request is official? I copied Professor Keene. Ms. Harlow replied within 18 minutes. No such pickup exists. Student assistants should not request dorm information. Please provide name if known. I stared at the reply until the letters blurred. In my first life, I had treated strange moments as isolated discomforts. A weird question here. A copied outfit there. A missing paperclip. A friend acting hurt. But manipulation is not one lightning strike. It is weather. You survive it by learning to read the pressure before the storm arrives. I typed Caleb Ward. Then I added, I am not making a formal accusation at this time, but I want the interaction recorded. I pressed send and felt something inside me settle. Documentation was not revenge. It was oxygen. The school changed after that, or maybe I changed enough to see its machinery. Ms. Harlow forwarded the issue to the exam office. Caleb was removed from finalist logistics, pending clarification. No announcement was made, but by morning he no longer carried office keys. Mira noticed. Of course she did. She came to breakfast without copying my tray for the first time in days. Instead of black coffee, she had orange juice, which she gripped so hard the plastic cup dented. Did you report Caleb? She asked, sliding into the seat beside me without invitation. Priya sat across from us, slowly chewing toast like she had wandered into a courtroom. I sipped my tea. I asked, housing a question. That's not an answer. It's the only one you need. Mira leaned closer, voice low. You're acting like everyone's out to get you. I looked at her hand on the table. Her nails were painted the pale pink I used to wear. A tiny smear of ink stained her thumb, the same green as my old highlight system. No, I said. Just the people asking for information they shouldn't need. Myra's eyes hardened. You think you're so clever now. It was the first honest sentence she had spoken to me in 2 lives. Priya's eyebrows lifted. Mira saw, softened, and laughed awkwardly. I mean, you've always been clever. I just don't know why you're treating me like an enemy. I stood, picking up my tray. Enemies attack you. I'm just unavailable. I walked away before she could cry. Behind me, Priya said quietly, Mira, what did Caleb ask her? I did not hear the answer, but I heard Myra's fork hit the plate. The third pattern interruption was my mother. In my first life, by the time scandal reached my parents, Myra's version had already hardened into official truth. My mother had sat across from me at our kitchen table, face gray, asking, Dawn, why would they say this if there was nothing? That question hurt more than expulsion. Not because she believed them fully, but because she believed institutions enough to doubt me. This time, I called her early. I did not tell her I had died. I did not tell her I had returned. I said, Mom, exam competition is getting strange. I moved rooms for privacy. I'm documenting everything. If anyone contacts you saying I'm in trouble, call me before you respond. She was silent for a long moment. Are you in danger? The word almost broke me. I looked around room 512, at the locked drawer, the blank wall, the camera-lit hallway beyond my door. Not like before, I whispered, then corrected myself. No. I'm being careful. My mother did not ask why I sounded like someone twice my age. She simply said, send me copies of anything important. And Dawn, you don't have to be nice to someone who makes you afraid. I pressed the phone to my ear and closed my eyes. In my first life, I had learned that too late. In this one, my mother handed it back to me like a weapon disguised as permission. 3 days before the exam, the fake anonymous account appeared. I knew because Priya sent a screenshot to the finalist group chat with the message, is this real or spam? The account name was ScholarGate_official, and the profile picture was a blurred school crest. The post promised high-confidence predictions from internal exam formatting for a fee. My pulse did not spike the way I expected. Maybe because I had been waiting. Maybe because a nightmare becomes less powerful when it arrives on schedule. In my first life, that account used my photo in private messages. This time because I had not given Mira my new headshot, because I had changed my privacy settings, because I had stopped feeding her pieces of myself, the account used no face. Its sample packet, however, had my old formatting, green section headers, blue formula boxes, red trap question labels. She had built it from scraps she took before I woke up. Enough to imitate me badly. Not enough to become me. I replied in the group chat before fear could dress itself as hesitation. Do not buy or download this. It is not official. I'm forwarding it to Professor Keene and exam security now. Then I did exactly that. No private panic, no desperate explanations, no waiting for someone else to define the situation. Professor Keene responded with one word, received. Exam security responded with a formal warning to all finalists within the hour. The account disappeared by evening. Mira did not come to dinner. Caleb was absent from afternoon class. And I slept 6 straight hours for the first time since Rebirth, which felt less like rest than rebellion. But Mira was not finished. I knew because the old disaster had 2 parts, the fake leak then the planted evidence. The account could vanish and still serve its purpose if printed packets appeared in my room. Except my room was no longer the room they knew. Room 417 was empty, inventoried, and under housing watch. My current room had digital access logs. My drawer held nothing except my exam admission envelope and a small photo of my parents I had finally placed on the desk after calling my mother. If Mira wanted her scene, she needed the old stage. If she did not know I had moved, she would go there. If she knew I had moved but could not admit how, she might still go there to retrieve whatever she or Caleb had hidden earlier. Either way, room 417 had become something better than a trap. It had become a mirror. The night before the exam, rain hit the windows in thin silver lines. Westbridge always felt dramatic in bad weather, its old stone buildings turning black under the clouds, its courtyard lamps glowing like witnesses afraid to speak. I sat in room 512 wearing plain gray pajamas, my hair loose, my phone on silent, my exam envelope locked away until morning. At 9:16 p.m., Mira messaged, "Good luck tomorrow. Despite everything, I hope you do well." I stared at it and felt nothing. At 9:22, "I miss when we were friends." At 9:31, "Can we please walk together tomorrow? I don't want things to end like this." There it was, the old doorway disguised as closure. In my first life, I had answered yes because I hated endings. This time, I replied with 8 words. "Good luck. I will be going on my own." Then I turned off read receipts, powered down my phone, and placed it across the room. The rain kept tapping. Soft, 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 sharp, sharp. I woke before dawn with a body that remembered dying and a mind that remembered everything else. Exam morning in my first life had smelled like wet concrete and Myra's vanilla perfume. She knocked at 6:10, crying that she had lost her admission code. I let her in. She hugged me too long, asked to use my bathroom, and while I brewed tea with shaking hands, she slipped the packet into my lower drawer. At 6:28, she left, saying she had found her code after all. At 6:41, 2 supervisors arrived with Ms. Harlow and opened my drawer after receiving an anonymous tip. At 7:30, I was in a disciplinary holding room instead of the exam hall. At 8 o'clock, the exam began without me. At 8:13, Mira scanned her admission QR code and walked into the future I had earned. This time, I woke in room 512, brushed my teeth, braided my hair high instead of low, wore a dark green blouse I had never worn in my first life, and took my exam envelope from a locked drawer. My hands were steady until I saw the QR code. Then rage moved through me so cleanly it felt like light. At 6:02 a.m., there was a knock on a door. Not mine. I know because my hallway remained silent except for the distant hum of the vending machine and the soft click of another student leaving for breakfast. But at 6:04, my phone, now powered on, lit with a message from an unknown number. "Are you not in your room?" I did not answer. At 6:05, Dawn, open the door. This isn't funny. My mouth went dry. She was at room 417. She had either not known or not believed the move. At 6:06, I know you're in there. At 6:07, if you make me late, I'll tell them everything. I sat on the edge of my bed, looking at the message, and for one dizzy second the old terror tried to rise. Explain, defend, respond, stop her. Then I heard my mother's voice. "You don't have to be nice to someone who makes you afraid." I locked my phone and slipped it into my bag. At 6:10, Ms. Harlow called.
"Dawn?
"Are you in dormitory, A?" "Yes." "Remain there for a moment." Her voice sounded clipped, not sleepy. "Did you give anyone permission to access C417? My fingers tightened around my bag strap. "No." "Did you arrange to meet anyone there this morning?" "No." A pause. Paper rustled. "All right. Come to the front desk of dormitory. Professor Keene is here." I closed my eyes. The mirror had worked. "Am I in trouble?" I asked, hating that some part of me still sounded 17. Ms. Harlow's voice softened by half a degree.
"No."
"But someone else may be." The walk to the front desk felt longer than the walk to my death. Dormitory A's lobby smelled like floor polish and burnt coffee. Professor Keen stood near the security monitor, wearing a rumpled coat over his exam day suit, his silver hair flattened on one side, as if he had slept badly. Ms. Harlow sat behind the desk, glasses low on her nose, reviewing footage. On the monitor, frozen in grainy color, Mira stood outside room 417 at 6:03 a.m., wearing my cream sweater. Not a similar one.
Mine.
The one I had donated to the common laundry bin 2 days after Rebirth because I could not stand to keep it. She must have taken it. She stood with her fist raised to knock, head turning left and right, a tote bag pressed against her side. Caleb was not visible, but at her feet was a brown document envelope. My stomach turned. We received an alert because C417 is marked vacant and under inventory restriction, Ms. Harlow said. The system flagged repeated access attempts. Access attempts.
My voice came out flat.
She clicked the footage forward. Mira knocked, waited, knocked harder, tried the handle, looked down the corridor, took something from her pocket. A keycard. She tapped it against the lock. Red light. Denied. She tapped again. Denied. Then she crouched and pushed the brown envelope under the door. For a moment, nobody spoke. The lobby clock ticked above us, vulgar and loud. Professor Keen's jaw tightened. Ms. Harlow rewound the footage, played it again, then looked at me. Do you recognize the student? I could have said no. I could have delayed. I could have protected the ghost of a friendship that had never existed. Instead, I said, Mira Vale. My voice did not shake. She's been asking for my study materials and dorm information. I have emails documenting concerns. Professor King glanced at Ms. Harlow. We have those. Of course he did.
I had sent them.
Documentation was a net I had woven day by day, and Mira had walked into it carrying her own rope. Security opened room 417 at 6:18. I was not allowed inside, which was fine because I never wanted to step into that room again. We watched from the lobby camera as Mr. Albright from exam security entered wearing gloves, picked up the brown envelope from the empty floor, and photographed it before opening. Even from the monitor, I recognized the green section headers, the blue formula boxes, the red trap question labels. My old format, mutilated into counterfeit authority. Mr. Albright removed a printed packet, a sticky note, and a small plastic card. Ms. Harlow's desk phone rang seconds later. She listened, eyes narrowing.
Understood, she said.
Then she hung up and turned to Professor Keen. It contains exam prediction materials and a note reading. Dawn, hide this until after scan-in. There is also a duplicate temporary access card issued under Caleb Ward's assistant credentials. I felt the room tilt, not from shock, but from the violent collapse of a fate that had once crushed me. In my first life, those items were found in my drawer. This time, they lay on the floor of an empty room because I had refused to stand where she aimed. Mira was brought to the lobby at 6:27 by the dorm supervisor, still wearing my cream sweater, still trying to cry. But panic had ruined her timing. Her face was flushed, her hair damp from rain, her lips trembling too early. Real fear does not wait for an audience. Hers had arrived before she could arrange it. She saw me standing beside Professor Keen and stopped so abruptly the supervisor almost bumped into her. For one perfect second, her eyes flicked from my face to my green blouse, to my bag, to the dormitory A sign behind me. Understanding spread across her features like spilled ink. I had moved. I had not told her. She had knocked on an empty door alone. The old script had continued without its victim, and now everyone could see who had been holding the pen. Dawn, she whispered, and somehow made my name sound like an accusation. Ms. Harlow stood. Mira Vale, you were recorded attempting to access a restricted vacant room and placing an envelope inside. You will come with us to exam security. Myra's eyes flooded. No, I was helping her.
She pointed at me.
There it was, the pivot. She told me to bring it. She said she couldn't risk carrying it herself. Professor Keen's expression did not change. When did she tell you? Mira swallowed. Last night.
How?
Message. Show us. Her hand went to her pocket, then froze. Of course there was no message. In my first life, She had created fake screenshots after having access to my phone. This time, my phone had never left my possession, my red receipts were off, and our last exchange showed me refusing to walk with her. Myra's tears thickened. She deleted them. Ms. Harlow said, "From your phone?" "No, from hers." The supervisor blinked. Even Caleb would have winced. I unlocked my phone and handed it to Professor Keene without being asked. "Our messages are intact." He did not read them aloud. He simply checked, then showed Ms. Harlow the screen. "Good luck. I will be going on my own." Simple.
Clean.
Untwistable. Mira shook her head. She planned this. She's been acting strange for weeks. She moved rooms secretly to make me look bad. I looked at her then, really looked. In my first life, this was the moment where I screamed. I had screamed in the disciplinary room until my throat tore, insisting I had been framed, that Mira was lying, that someone needed to check cameras, messages, timestamps. My desperation made me look guilty. Her tears made her look wounded. This time, I said nothing at first. Silence expanded. Mira had to fill it. "She hates me," she said, voice rising. "She thinks I copy her, but I don't. She's obsessed with me. She probably put that envelope there herself and told everyone I did it." Ms. Harlow turned the monitor toward her. On screen, Mira crouched in front of room 417 and pushed the envelope under the door. The footage did not care how pretty she cried. The first crack in Myra's performance was not loud. It was a tiny sound in her throat, almost a hiccup, when she realized the camera angle showed everything. Her hand, the envelope, the denied keycard, the empty corridor, the absence of me. Professor Keene said, Dawn was in dormitory A at the time. Her entry log shows she exited her room at 6:14 to come here after Ms. Harlow called. She could not have placed the envelope under C417 at 6:07. "Then she made me do it," Mira said immediately. Immediately. Ms. Harlow's face hardened.
"How?"
Myra's mouth opened.
"Closed."
"She manipulated me." The word hung there like a cheap decoration. I almost admired the audacity. If the facts could not make her innocent, she would make herself emotionally kidnapped. In my first life, adults loved that kind of explanation because it saved them from investigating. This time, there were logs, emails, footage, and a duplicate card with Caleb's credentials inside the envelope. Feelings had arrived late to a room already full of evidence. At 6:43, Caleb was pulled from the east gate before he could leave campus. I did not see it happen, but I heard later that he tried to claim he was sick, then claimed his temporary access card had been stolen, then claimed Mira must have taken it from his bag, then finally stopped talking when exam security showed him the administrative printer logs. The packet had been printed at 11:38 p.m. from his assistant account. The file name was D_Ellis_finalscanned, PDF. Not subtle. Criminals in school stories are always either geniuses or idiots. Real ones are both, depending on how much they underestimate you. Caleb had assumed the old world still existed, the world where I stayed in room 417, where the camera was broken, where Mira could cry, and I could panic. He did not plan for a vacant room under inventory restriction. He did not plan for Ms. Harlow, queen of housing compliance. He did not plan for a girl who had already died and returned with an allergy to coincidence. The scholarship exam began at 8 o'clock. I was allowed to sit it. That sentence sounds simple, but to me it was a resurrection inside the resurrection. At 7:22, after giving a formal statement, I stood outside the auditorium with my admission QR code in my hand while other finalists whispered in clusters, eyes darting toward Myra's empty place in line. In my first life, I watched the exam begin through a glass panel from a holding room, my future sealed outside my reach. This time, I stood beneath the bright scan and lights while the invigilator waved me forward. My phone was sealed in the exam pouch. My bag was checked. My hands were dry. QR code, the invigilator said. I held it out. The scanner beeped green. Candidate verified. Dawn Ellis. The sound was small, electronic, almost ugly. I nearly cried from the beauty of it. The exam itself was not dramatic. That surprised me. After weeks of rebirth, betrayal, surveillance, and strategy, I expected the paper to glow or tremble or reveal some cosmic message in the essay section. Instead, it was ink and pages and questions that rewarded preparation. Maybe that was the real miracle. Not revenge, not exposure, not watching Myra's plan fold around her like wet paper, but being allowed to do the thing I had worked for before someone else turned my effort into evidence against me. I wrote steadily. The predicted essay angle was close to one I had prepared, but not because of leaks, because I had studied patterns like a serious student, not a thief. Halfway through, rain stopped tapping the windows, and sunlight pushed across the desk in a pale rectangle. I remember noticing it during a calculus proof and thinking, absurdly, that room 417 had afternoon light, but room 512 had morning. Maybe that mattered. Maybe I had spent 2 long, loving rooms that only looked beautiful after the day was almost over. When the exam ended at noon, the hallway erupted in the usual post-test chaos. People comparing answers, groaning about the statistics section, laughing too loudly from relief. Priya found me near the water fountain and hugged me before I could react. "I'm sorry," she said into my shoulder. "I don't even know for what yet, but I feel like I should say it." The old Dawn would have comforted her immediately. The new Dawn let the apology exist without rescuing her from it. "Thank you," I said. She pulled back, eyes wet. "Mira told me things. Not huge things, just little things. That you thought I was using you. That you didn't want me in the finalist group." I didn't fully believe her, but I didn't ask you either. Little things. People always think little lies are harmless because they do not see the architecture being built. Mira had laid bricks everywhere. I nodded. "Ask next time." Priya winced. "I will." It was not forgiveness, not yet. But it was a door left unlocked from my side, which was more than Mira deserved and exactly as much as Priya had earned. By afternoon, rumors spread faster than official notices. Mira was suspended pending investigation. Caleb was removed from campus. Exam security was reviewing communications, printer logs, dorm access, and financial transactions connected to the fake packet. Students who had bought the anonymous predictions were told to come forward voluntarily. Some cried. Some lied. Some pretended they had only clicked out of curiosity. The finalist group chat, once full of panic and resource links, became a graveyard of deleted messages. I did not participate. I went back to room 512, changed out of my exam clothes, and sat on the floor with my back against the bed. My body should have felt victorious. Instead, it trembled with delayed fear. Survival often arrives without music. Sometimes it just sits beside you on the floor and waits while you shake. At 4:19 p.m., my father called. He had the kind of voice that turned worry into logistics. "Your mother told me enough to make me angry and not enough to make me useful," he said. "Are you safe?" I laughed despite myself, and the laugh broke into something almost like a sob. "Yes." "Good. Do you need a lawyer?" "Maybe later." "Do you need me there?" I looked around the small room. The narrow bed, the blank wall, the locked drawer, the window facing the back garden. In my first life, I had refused to let my parents come because I was ashamed. This time, shame belonged elsewhere. "Tomorrow," I said. "Can you and Mum come tomorrow?" He exhaled. "We'll be there." After we hung up, I opened my email and found a message from Professor Keene. "You handled today with exceptional composure.
Please rest.
Formal proceedings will continue, but your exam eligibility and submission are secure."
Secure.
I read the word 4 times. Then I put my head down on my knees and finally cried. The investigation did not end quickly because real consequences rarely move at the speed of gossip. Mira tried 3 stories in the first 24 hours. First, she claimed I asked her to hide the packet. When messages disproved that, she claimed Caleb manipulated both of us. When Caleb's statement apparently contradicted her, she claimed she had found the envelope outside room 417 and was trying to return it. That version collapsed because footage showed her carrying it from the stairwell. By the second day, she stopped speaking without her parents present. Her mother arrived in pearls and fury, demanding to know why a scholarship girl with anxiety was being treated like a criminal. Her father arrived later and said very little, which frightened her more. I saw them only once, through the glass wall of the administration office, where Mira sat small between them wearing a gray hoodie instead of my stolen sweater. Without my clothes, my phrases, my hairstyle, my study system, she looked unfinished, like a sketch abandoned halfway through. The cream sweater became evidence. That was almost funny, in a bleak little way. Housing traced it to the common laundry donation bin, where I had placed it after photographing the bag for my own records because paranoia had become my spiritual advisor. Mira claimed it was hers. Then Priya found an old group photo from last semester where I wore it during debate finals. The sweater had a tiny embroidered moon on the left cuff, added by my aunt. Mira had not noticed. Copying makes people careless about meaning. They reproduce the outline and miss the soul. When Ms. Harlow asked why she wore my sweater to my former room while carrying a packet addressed to me, Mira reportedly said, "Because Dawn likes making people think everything belongs to her." I was not in the room, but when Professor Keene told me later, he removed his glasses and rubbed his eyes for a full 10 seconds, which was his version of screaming. Caleb broke before Mira did. Boys like Caleb believe consequences are negotiations until someone shows them paperwork. Faced with printer logs, access card records, anonymous account payment trails, and screenshots recovered from his school device, he admitted parts of the plan while minimizing everything else. He said Mira's approached him first. He said she wanted insurance because I was acting superior and refusing to share materials. He said the packet was supposed to scare me into withdrawing, not cause a full expulsion. That was a lie. In my first life, they pushed until expulsion, then kept pushing until I fell down the stairs. But the school did not know that, and I could not prove a murder from a timeline that no longer existed. I had to accept the justice available in this life, imperfect as it was. Caleb's confession confirmed enough. The fake account, the packet, the attempt to use my old room, the duplicate access card, the plan to implicate me if anything went wrong. Mira, according to him, had studied my habits for months. She said Dawn was predictable, he told investigators. She said all we had to do was knock. All we had to do was knock. When Professor Keene repeated that line to me, something inside my chest went very still. It was such a small sentence to contain so many graves. In my first life, Mira knocked and I opened. She knocked and took my folder. She knocked and entered my room. She knocked and planted evidence. She knocked on my trust until it cracked, then blamed me for the break. I used to think my mistake was kindness. It was not. Kindness is not stupidity. My mistake was believing every knock deserved a door. Some knocks are not requests. They are tests. They ask, "Can I cross this boundary too?" This time, I had answered no without saying it aloud. I had changed rooms. I had changed patterns. I had changed the ending. The disciplinary hearing happened 5 days after the exam. I attended with my parents, Professor Keene, and a folder of printed documentation so organized that my father whispered, "You could run a small country with this." I almost smiled. Across the room, Mira sat with her parents and a school-appointed advocate. She did not look at me at first. She looked at my mother. That annoyed me more than hatred would have. Even cornered, Mira searched for the softest target. My mother stared back with the calm expression she used when bargaining with insurance companies, and Mira quickly looked away. The panel reviewed the timeline. My room transfer request, documented concerns, Caleb's dorm address inquiry, Ms. Harlow's denial, the fake account warning, the exam morning footage, the envelope, the duplicate card, printer logs, and Caleb's partial confession. Listening to it laid out so cleanly made the whole thing sound obvious. But evil often looks obvious only after someone survives it long enough to organize the evidence. Then Mira spoke.
Of course she did.
Her voice was small but steady, polished overnight. "I know mistakes were made," she began, and I almost laughed because mistakes were apparently things that happened around her, like weather. But Dawn has always made me feel inferior. She isolated me, then acted like my panic was proof of guilt. I admit I went to her old room. I admit I had the envelope. But I was scared. Caleb told me Dawn was setting me up, and I thought if I brought the packet to her room, I could force her to explain. Her mother nodded furiously. Her advocate looked relieved to finally have a version with fewer holes. Mira turned to me then, eyes shining. I never wanted to hurt you. I wanted you to stop looking at me like I was nothing. There it was. Under all the lies, a truth twisted into a blade. She did not copy me because she admired me. She copied me because being herself felt like being nothing, and rather than build a self, she tried to wear mine. The old Dawn would have felt pity. The new Dawn felt pity too, but it stood far behind the boundary, where it could not unlock anything. The panel chair asked if I wanted to respond. I stood slowly. My printed statement shook once in my hand, then steadied. Mira says I made her feel inferior, I said. I can't speak to what she felt. I can speak to what she did. She copied my work systems, requested my private materials, tried to get my dorm information through Caleb, wore my clothing, used a duplicate access card connected to him, carried a counterfeit exam packet to my former room, and attempted to connect my name to it. Whether she felt insecure, frightened, or angry does not change those actions. I moved rooms quietly because I felt unsafe. The footage shows what happened when she believed I was still available. I looked at Mira, not with rage, not with triumph, but with the full weight of my continued existence. I am not responsible for what someone does after I close my door. Silence followed. Not dramatic silence. Administrative silence. The kind filled with pens scratching, pages turning, adults realizing that a sentence might outlive the meeting. Mira cried then, but it was different from before.
No soft tremble, no gras feltir.
Her face crumpled with something raw and furious because the room had not bent around her. Her mother put an arm around her. Her father looked at the table. The panel dismissed us while they deliberated. In the hallway, Mira passed close enough for me to smell vanilla perfume. You ruined my life, she whispered. The sentence should have scared me. Instead, it sounded almost childish. I turned to her. No, I said quietly. I stopped letting you use mine. Her eyes widened, maybe because I had not raised my voice, maybe because no one else heard enough to become her audience. Then my mother stepped between us without touching her and said, "Keep walking." Mira did. The decision came that evening. Mira was expelled from the scholarship track, suspended pending final board action, and barred from sitting any rescheduled assessment connected to the national scholarship. Caleb was terminated from his assistant position, suspended, and referred for external investigation because of access misuse and payment records. Students who purchased the packet faced lesser penalties if they came forward before the deadline. My exam remained valid. My scholarship application remained active. The official notice used careful language, misconduct, attempted academic fraud, unauthorized access, impersonation of institutional materials. It did not say copycat. It did not say predator. It did not say she knocked on an empty door and finally met herself. But I knew. For a week, everyone looked at me differently. Some with guilt. Some with curiosity. Some with the greedy excitement people get around someone else's disaster once it becomes safe to discuss. I always knew Mira was off, one girl told me, though she had liked every one of Myra's vague posts. You're so strong, another said, as if strength were a personality trait and not something you become when weakness is punished. Priya stayed close, but not too close, which I appreciated. She sent me resources publicly, asked before sitting beside me, and never once said, "I can't believe she did that," because we both knew she could believe it now that belief cost nothing. The strangest reaction came from younger students who had only seen the surface. One of them stopped me outside the library and whispered, "Is it true she tried to become you?" I thought about the cream sweater, the braid, the highlighters, the copied phrases, the stolen room pattern. "No," I said. "She tried to use me. Becoming someone takes work." The scholarship results were announced 2 weeks later in the auditorium, beneath the same chandelier that had once shone over Myra's congratulatory photo in my first life. I sat between Priya and another finalist named Lila, palms folded in my lap, telling myself I would be fine either way. That was almost true. Winning mattered, but it no longer felt like proof that I deserved to exist. I had already reclaimed something bigger than a certificate. Still, when the headmaster stepped to the podium and read, "This year's Westbridge National Scholar is Dawn Ellis," the room blurred. Applause rose around me, loud and sudden, and for one heartbeat I saw another version of myself standing outside a glass door, unheard, while Mira smiled under the lights. Then the vision shattered. Priya squeezed my hand. Professor Keene stood in the front row clapping with a small, proud nod. My parents were on their feet. I walked to the stage in my dark green blouse, the one Mira had never copied, and accepted the envelope with both hands. The headmaster asked if I wanted to say a few words.
I had not planned to.
In my first life, Mira had given a speech about integrity, and people cried. I remembered every sentence because it played on the school website after my expulsion, her voice floating over images of her holding the scholarship that should have been mine. Integrity, she had said, is choosing truth when lies would benefit you. This time, I stood at the microphone and looked out at the rows of students, teachers, parents, and finalists who had survived the same exam season with varying degrees of honesty. My prepared self wanted to say thank you and leave. My reborn self wanted to mark the ground. I'm grateful for this scholarship, I said. But I'm more grateful for something I learned before receiving it. Hard work needs protection. Boundaries are not selfish. Documentation is not paranoia. And no one who truly respects you will require access to your life as proof of friendship. The auditorium went very quiet. I smiled, not softly, not cruelly, just clearly. Thank you to the teachers and staff who protected the process when it mattered. I stepped back before my voice could break. Afterward, my mother hugged me so tightly the scholarship envelope bent between us. You sounded like a lawyer, my father said, wiping his eyes while pretending not to. Professor Keene approached and handed me a small notebook.
For university, he said.
It was plain black, with thick pages and an elastic band. Inside the front cover, he had written, "Keep records. Keep boundaries. Keep going." I looked away quickly because crying in front of Professor Keene felt illegal. "Thank you," I said. He nodded. "Also, for the record, your essay section was excellent." That made me laugh harder than anything else. After all the horror, the man still cared most about the essay. Mira disappeared from school before the final board decision. Some said her parents withdrew her to avoid formal expulsion. Others said she transferred overseas. Caleb's name vanished from group chats, then from memory, as boys like him often do when institutions prefer quiet removals over public accountability. I expected to feel cheated by their absence, but instead I felt relief so ordinary it surprised me. Revenge stories make you think closure arrives when the villain suffers in front of you. Real closure is quieter. It is waking up without checking whether your door is locked 3 times. It is leaving your notebook on your desk and trusting that the room will still be yours when you return. It is drinking coffee because you like it, not because someone else is watching your order. It is choosing a hairstyle without wondering who will wear it tomorrow. Still, ghosts are stubborn. A month after the scholarship ceremony, I visited Dormitory C to return a library book to Priya, who had been reassigned to a room near the old corridor. I told myself I was fine. Then we turned the corner, and there it was, room 417. The door had been repainted. The inventory notice was gone. A new student had taped a cartoon frog beside the nameplate. For a moment, my vision doubled.
Empty door.
Knock. Envelope. Blood on stairs. Vanilla perfume. The old life pressing its cold hand against the new one. Priya noticed and stopped. "We can go another way," she said. I almost said yes. Instead, I walked closer and stood in front of the door that had once been the center of Myra's plan. It looked smaller than I remembered. Doors often do after you stop worshipping what is behind them. I did not knock. That felt important. I simply stood there long enough to let my body understand what my mind already knew. The room had no power. It had been a place, not a fate. Mira had knocked on it expecting me to exist exactly where she needed me, and I had not. That absence saved me. Not a dramatic confrontation, not a secret counterattack, not a perfect speech.
Absence.
The refusal to appear on command. The decision to move without announcement. The courage to let someone knock and find nothing but their own intention echoing back. Priya waited quietly beside me. After a minute, I said, "I'm done." She nodded. We walked away. University began in autumn, and I chose a residence with electronic locks, boring hallways, and no courtyard view. My new roommate, Anika, was a biomedical engineering student who labeled her food with aggressive precision and considered small talk a public health hazard. I liked her immediately. On the second day, she asked, "Are you always this private, or did something happen?" I considered lying. Then I said, "Something happened." She nodded once. "Do you want me to avoid borrowing your stuff?" "Yes." "Great. I hate borrowing." That was the beginning of our friendship. It had no dramatic confessions, no instant sisterhood, no late-night promises to share everything. It grew in the space where boundaries were treated as information, not insults. Sometimes she sent me memes from across the room instead of speaking. Sometimes I left tea outside her door during exam week. Neither of us knocked unless invited. The scholarship opened doors I had once thought were locked from the inside. I joined a research program. I published an essay on academic integrity systems that Professor Keene called a little pointed, but necessary. I learned that institutions love words like resilience because they sound cheaper than prevention. I argued for secure reporting channels, digital access logs, and student education on coercive collaboration. Some people listened. Some nodded politely and did nothing. I kept records anyway. Not because I expected betrayal behind every smile, but because memory is fragile when power prefers convenience. The old Dawn had trusted people to remember truth because truth felt obvious to her. The new Dawn understood that truth needs structure if it is going to survive panic, performance, and tears. One winter evening, nearly a year after Rebirth, I received an email from an unfamiliar address. No subject. The body contained only 4 sentences. "You got everything. I got nothing. I hope it was worth it. I hope every door you close keeps you alone." There was no name, but I knew. My first instinct was not fear. It was exhaustion. Mira still thought life was a room with one occupant, and if I had something, she must have nothing. She still imagined boundaries as loneliness because she had only ever entered people by invasion. I could have replied. I could have written a perfect paragraph about accountability. I could have attached the footage, the decision, the scholarship photo, the proof that I had survived. Instead, I archived the email in a folder labeled records and blocked the sender. Then I went to dinner with Anika, who spent 20 minutes explaining why the dining hall soup violated both chemistry and morality. I laughed so hard I forgot about the email until the next morning. The truth is, I did not become fearless. That would be a lie, and I am done building my life on lies, even pretty ones. I still check locks when I am stressed. I still dislike vanilla perfume. I still feel my pulse jump when someone copies a phrase I use often. Sometimes, when rain taps the window in that old rhythm, I wake expecting room 417th ceiling and Myra's voice asking me to open up. But fear is no longer my manager. It is just a messenger, sometimes dramatic, sometimes useful, often late. I listen, think it if it has a point, and keep living. That is the part Rebirth stories rarely explain. You do not return from death as a perfect blade. You return as a person with shaking hands who has learned where not to stand. If I could speak to the girl I was before the first knock, I would not tell her to become cruel. Cruelty would have made Mira write about one thing, and I refuse to let her author even that footnote. I would tell that girl to stay kind, but stop confusing kindness with access. I would tell her that a locked door is not an insult. I would tell her that friendship should not require screenshots, alibis, or the slow surrender of your habits. I would tell her that admiration feels warm, while imitation with resentment feels like being watched by a mirror that smiles too late. I would tell her to move rooms the first time her body whispered, "Something is wrong here." Not because running solves everything, but because sometimes survival begins with changing the address where harm expects to find you. People still ask about Mira sometimes, usually in whispers softened by time. Did I hate her? Did I pity her? Did I ever miss her? The answers change depending on the day. I hate what she did. I pity the emptiness that made copying feel easier than becoming. I do not miss her because the person I missed never existed. She was a collage of my own generosity reflected back at me until I mistook the echo for companionship. The hardest grief was not losing Mira. It was accepting that the friendship I mourned had been built mostly for my side. Once I understood that, the grief became lighter. Not gone, but honest. On the anniversary of exam morning, I returned to Westbridge as a guest speaker for the new finalists. Professor Keene invited me with a subject line that read, "Come scare them productively." I wore a navy suit, not a school uniform, and stood in the same seminar room where Mira had once spoken about collaboration, as if she were laying a silk sheet over a knife. The students looked younger than I remembered being. They had bright notebooks, anxious eyes, and the dangerous belief that good intentions are enough to protect them. I told them about source logs. I told them about group channels. I told them to never buy anonymous packets, never share admission codes, never let someone pressure them into private academic exchanges close to major exams. I did not tell them everything. Some stories are not owed to every audience. But near the end, a girl in the front row raised her hand and asked, "What if someone says you're selfish for saying no?" I looked at her, and for a second I saw myself behind her eyes, hand already reaching for a door chain I had not yet learned to use. "Then let them say it," I replied. "Selfish is sometimes what people call you when their access expires." After the session, I walked past Dormitory C alone. It was spring now. The courtyard trees were green, the windows open, music leaking from someone's room. Room 417's curtain fluttered in the breeze. Life had filled the space that once held my fear. I stood below it only briefly. Then I turned toward the main gate, where students were scanning IDs for evening leave. The scanner beeped green for each verified person, one after another, ordinary little sounds of permission. I thought of the exam QR code, my hand holding steady, the screen accepting me back into my own future. I thought of Mira outside an empty door, knocking harder and harder, unable to understand that the absence was the answer. And I finally felt the ending settle, not like a slammed door, but like a lock clicking gently into place. I was reborn 3 weeks before the exam that once destroyed me. I did not expose my copycat by screaming. I did not defeat her by becoming more vicious than she was. I changed my dorm room quietly. I protected my work openly. I stopped feeding her my patterns. I let the official systems record what my fear had been trying to tell me. And when she came at dawn with my stolen sweater, a fake packet, a duplicate keycard, and the same old knock, she found the room empty. No crying friend.
No unlocked drawer.
No panicked girl to frame. Just a vacant floor, a camera light, and the truth she had carried there herself. That is the thing about people who build their lives around copying yours. They can only follow the version of you they understand. The moment you change, they are left performing to an empty room. And sometimes, if you are lucky, if you are careful, if you finally stop opening the door, the whole world gets to watch them knock.